Thank you all for joining. This is FirstBank and FirstBank's corporate banking group interaction. We had a bit of a detailed or longish topic, but essentially we all know why we're here. COVID has disrupted and taken us all off track, and we need to understand how we should respond as it affects us. Going quickly through the list of panelists, I have Mr. Yusuf, Development Finance at the Central Bank of Nigeria. I also have Mr. Wole Obayomi, who is the head of tax for KPMG in Africa. I have Bumi Bajamo. Bumi Bajamo is the head of the manufacturing group in the corporate bank at First Bank of Nigeria. And I have Ini Ebong. Mr. Ebong is the group treasurer of the bank, my colleague. And we have our CEO, last, certainly not least, the CEO of the bank, and also a member of the Coalition Against COVID, Dr. Adeshola Adejuton. So I will let the CEO kick off, and I am going to be strict on time because we don't have a lot of it. So I would speak to panelists if you are going way above the allocated time, and apologies in advance if I have to prompt you. But I will ask our CEO to kick off, welcome us, and CEO. He's, in addition to being CEO, he's a member of this Coalition Against COVID, which is the CBN tie. So in addition to his introductory remarks, we quickly need from him some perspective from the COVID committee's view in terms of what is going on, what is planned, and how they see the future from a relief perspective. So I'll hand over to you.
Mr. Mitch's mic. Mr. Mitch's mic.
Good morning. Good morning, distinguished panelists and our distinguished customers and other key stakeholders. It's always a very good opportunity for me to have the opportunity to host our stakeholders topical issues of this nature. Let me welcome you on behalf of the Board of Directors of our great institution, FirstBank, to this event. And my comment to be in two parts. I will speak about the impact on the financial market. I've also been requested to give some synopsis on what it is that we're doing with COVID, which is a coalition, private sector coalition against COVID-19. For us at FirstBank, our customers are right in there at the center of our business. And when we talk about it, when we use our war slogan, "You First," it's not just a slogan. It's something that is enshrined in the DNA of our institution that has ensured that this institution, we've thrived over the last 126 years. We've seen several seasons. Incidentally, the last time the world saw any pandemic of this, closer to this, of this magnitude was the Spanish flu of 1918. And our bank was run then, so we've successfully weathered that. And we believe with the combined knowledge that is available to the entire world and to our country, we will also eventually shake off this pandemic. In terms of COVID, when COVID-19 pandemic struck, we pull ourselves together as private sectors with the intention of providing what we call strategic support to the federal government and to the various state governments to quickly deal with this menace to ensure that the impact on the economy and on the larger society is minimized. To date, we've successfully gathered together close to about 28 billion naira of donations. And the affairs of CACOVID is being managed actively by a steering committee that is chaired by the governor of the central bank, Mr. Godwin Emefiele, and other leaders of the private sector, Alhaji Aliko Dangote, myself, and a host of CEOs of other institutions that contributed 1 billion naira and above. And what were we trying to achieve? One, we were fully aware that we needed to provide support to government in terms of providing additional isolation centers, testing kits, and medications. So that was the first area where we focused on. We also realized quickly that given where we are as a country, that advocacy and education is a very important element that we needed to do to ensure that our people adopt the new way of life that will enable and accelerate recovery and also slow down transmission of the virus within the society. So advocacy is a second pillar. But because we are also fully aware, being leaders of the private sector, that a significant percentage of the adult people in our country, they operate and work in the informal sector. We also realized very quickly that we must provide some support to government in the area of palliatives to the citizens. So as I speak to you today, we've actually commissioned a number of the isolation centers sponsored or equipped by CACOVID in several states of the Federation. Obviously, we've done Lagos, we've done Kano, we've commissioned Port Harcourt, we've commissioned Enugu. Yesterday, we've commissioned Ogun. Yesterday, we commissioned Oshogbo. And last week, Friday, we commissioned Maiduguri. And there are a couple of other states that are all slated for commissioning between now and the end of next week. We have also concluded plans to provide basic foodstuff to 1.7 million households spread through the nooks and cranny of our country, the people that are most vulnerable. And as I speak, and it's essentially rice, beans, maize, pasta, noodles, sugar, and salt in different quantity. I think on the average, it's about 5 kilograms of each of those items that I've mentioned that will be distributed to 1.7 million households. In certain locations, rather than do maize, we're doing semovita or semolina, but we did that survey and we're working actively with the Nigerian Governors Forum to ensure that this is done in a very orderly fashion. So that is CACOVID. Our intention is to continue to support the government to ensure that the downside risk posed by COVID to the population is managed very rapidly. And that way we can fully reopen the economy SAP to ensure that we reverse the current doldrum in the entire economic space of the country. In terms of the financial services sector itself, globally we've seen the impact of the pandemic has been quite significant. We've seen significant volatility in stock market. Indeed, we've seen near collapse of stock market in many countries due to uncertainties. Very low investment as investors anticipate lower corporate earnings. We have also seen very tight global financing as money capital started moving to the to safety. So and that impact has been quite significant in terms of impact on the developing countries. And this tightening of the global financing environment is actually despite the various stimulus packages that has been put in place by the various government and central bank all over the world. We've also seen significant slump in growth across several sectors. Hospitality, tourism, international travels readily comes to mind. And indeed, those sectors, the projection out there is that they will record significant negative growth. We've also seen significant disruption to global supply chain, leading to price hikes in many countries, leading to shortages. And we've seen this impact is quite significant from a globalization perspective. We have seen countries now beginning to ask questions whether it does make sense to put their production capacity in so-called low-cost offshore locations. So people are rethinking the concept of using China as the global manufacturing hub for the entire world. Coming home, nearer home, I think the biggest impact that we have seen, especially as the economy of our country is concerned, is a significant drop in the price of crude oil. Again, enabled by the closure of the major economies all over the world, leading to massive reduction in demand, but also complicated by what I refer to as a infighting between two significant oil producers, Russia and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. On the other hand, because of the health challenges posed by this COVID crisis, we've seen very high health expenditure and high social vulnerabilities on account of hunger. I just mentioned what the COVID group were doing, for example, to support the Nigerian government. So that's what we've seen globally, setting the global context. If I now, we have seen significant pressure on revenue of banks and their profitability, again on account of financial banks decline in the level of economic activities. We've seen investment decisions being pushed forward. We've also seen several situations whereby customers are coming forward to negotiate tighter interest rates and due to their own high operating costs and demanding for lower fee and commission rate. In our environment here, we've also seen higher forex funding costs and reduction in trade lines. Again, this is not unexpected. There are concerns about the level of external reserve of our country. And we've seen a number of foreign financial institutions beginning to ask questions and taking decisions regarding the trade limits that they've given to banks, not just in Nigeria, but in the in virtually the whole of the developing economy. So we've seen reduction in trade lines. We've also seen higher rate of forex funding. Obviously, because the COVID pandemic is impacting various sectors, however, certain sectors are more vulnerable. Like I mentioned, I gave the example of hospitality, aviation, whatever. There will be some uptick in the level of non-performing assets. But what is also good about this is that given our recent experience of having to deal with the 2016 crisis, banks and the regulators, not just in Nigeria, globally, have been more proactive in dealing with this particular point. We've also seen significant increase in the level of cyber attacks. Again, due to the closure, most brick and mortar channels for most banks were either shut down completely, or most of them were operating skeletal. They were operating skeletal services. So what has happened is that most banks, FirstBank being the leader in that space, we've virtually migrated a chunk of our customer. For us, we've migrated about 85% of our customer-induced transaction onto alternative channels. But with that, we've seen an unprecedented increase in attempted attacks on the cyberspace. So, and that's a major area of concern. To the best of our knowledge, at least for our own institution, none has been successful, but we've recorded as high as about 700 to 1,000% in terms of attempts vis-a-vis pre-COVID season. So how have banks been responding to this? I spoke earlier on that banks have been proactive, more proactive this time around, to having discussions with their customers, realigning repayment to the reality of the cash flow of various customers. In certain instances, banks are given deferrals and expanding, enhancing moratorium to give their customers the required breathing space to be able to restructure their facilities. We've also seen initiatives like a bank waiving repayment fees and charges. And on the other side, we've also seen banks, FirstBank being one of them, accelerating the pace at which we are making working capital available to banks, because the supply chain, like I mentioned when I was setting the global context, have changed, and people are now quickly reevaluating their supply chain. Part of what is changing, or part of what is being questioned this time around, is the wisdom between just-in-time inventory management methodology. For example, people are asking questions: when next do I know that things will get locked down and my factory will be out of production because I haven't stored enough inventory? So, like I said, the COVID-19 pandemic is forcing conversations, challenging established business wisdom, because the world hasn't seen anything of this magnitude in recent time. The other thing that our banks have been doing, we've been aiding customers to access low interest rate fund, especially the various intervention fund that the central bank has put in place in Nigeria. And I'm happy that we have Mr. Yila Yusuf, Director of Development Finance Central Bank, in-house today, and I believe our customers will benefit significantly from having someone of his caliber talk to them and talk to us about that window and how we can optimize the usage of that window. I think lastly, from me, the way to look at this pandemic is a major crisis that would need to deal with, but is a crisis that must not be wasted. You can have a bad crisis and you can also have a good crisis. What we would like to do, what we are doing as FirstBank, and we would like our customers to also take away from this session, is how do I turn what is obviously a crisis into a good crisis? Opportunity to reinvent your business, opportunity to question some established wisdom in your business. Like I mentioned to my team earlier on this week, thinking out of the box is not even sufficient for this season. All established norms and rules and wisdom, but that is the only way we will be able to innovate. I will pause to be sure and be willing to take questions. Thank you.
Thanks, MD. The way we planned the session was that we let all the panelists speak, and then we will take questions thereafter. So hopefully you'll be around. We're receiving questions for you already. Just a quick reminder to everyone that's joined, please send your questions to the bottom of your screen. We started receiving questions, so please continue to do that. And thanks for everyone. People continue to join. We have just under 300 people on at the moment. I will move quickly on to Mr. Wole Obayomi, and I would do a quick introduction. Actually, his resume extends over a number of pages, so we'll be here all day if I decided to read verbatim, but his track record speaks for itself. Mr. Bayemi is the head of tax KPMG in Africa. His career is quite interesting. He trained as a lawyer initially as a barrister, practiced, and then went into tax. So a combination of law and tax is quite a powerful one. He also writes. He's written extensively across legal, business, and regulatory tax issues. And he's also served in a couple of sovereign investments on various policy issues. Mr. Bayomi, thanks for making time to join us today. You have on the webinar our clients, mostly corporate clients, manufacturing, and all sorts of businesses and conglomerates. We will kick you off with giving you 10 minutes really to speak to the fiscal plans. And we hear all sorts of stuff around how, you know, the federal government and the state and the local governments have arrangements around tax as a direct response to COVID-19 to make things easier for corporates. So if you would speak to that, and if you would kind of guide Treasurer from a tax perspective, what should we be doing at this moment? Thanks, Mr. Bayomi.
Thank you very much for that generous introduction. Good morning, everyone. I hope you all keeping safe and well. I'd like to thank the management of FirstBank for inviting me to share with you my thoughts on tax advisory in the midst of the market disruption occasioned by COVID-19. A former US President, Benjamin Franklin, once said, "In this world, nothing can be said to be certain except death and taxes." And that really is a reality. We all die someday, but until then, our tax obligation won't go away. And that is why so far, there is no country in the world that has granted tax relief measures in response to COVID-19 that has completely canceled their taxpayers' tax obligations. Even in a country like the US, for instance, that's generous to give trillions of dollars out. At the end of the day, taxpayers still have to pay back the treasury. So in essence, tax is a part of life that you cannot wish away. While you can try and dodge it for some time, and good luck to you, you shall not come by the legal authorities. It will get to a stage when it becomes inevitable. So having said that, my approach to making my contribution during this panel discussion will actually be to go through questions that agitate taxpayers at this time. So one question, for instance, is, are the tax reliefs announced by the federal government adequate? And my response to that is that if you are looking at what the federal government has done relative to what some other countries have done, we might feel it's inadequate. So for instance, Kenya, they reduced their corporate income tax rate by 5%, personal income tax rate by 5%, and VAT by 2%. But then, to be fair, we have to look at Nigeria's peculiar situation, where it's not just a pandemic that we face, but we're also grappling with oil price shock, with the result that government budget really is in significant deficit. And with this reality, therefore, government doesn't have a war chest out of which they can begin to give out so much in terms of tax rebates to taxpayers. And concerning state governments also, their main source of income is personal income tax and other taxes that generate from individual residents in their states. Again, with job losses and pay cuts resulting in lower taxes, and then also with dwindling revenue allocation from the federation account, again, there's not much that we can expect from them. So I think in the context of that, really, we can't blame government too much if they are not giving too much in taxes yet. Now, what should corporates do in order to ride through the storm that they currently go through? First is you must look for ways to reduce your cost of compliance and also your tax bills. And a few thoughts on that I will share. Number one is that you should remit your transaction taxes as and when due, withholding tax and VAT. Because if you don't do so, there will be penalties and interest, which will again add up to your tax bill. Then, where you have been delinquent as a taxpayer, please go and quantify your liability, self-report yourself to the FRS, and pay the tax due to them in return for waiver of penalty and interest. That window is open until 31st of May, and now that they need cash, they will welcome such applications from taxpayers who are willing to make voluntary disclosure. Then if you are currently undergoing a tax allowance in that situation, to pay the tax due by the 31st of May 2020 in return for full waiver of penalty and interest, which really, to me, is generous. And if you are, as a taxpayer, if you are cash strapped and you cannot pay your corporate income tax when your returns are due for filing, please apply to the tax authorities now, letting them know that you don't have enough cash to be able to pay your tax as and when due. And then ask for a breather within which you will then be able to meet your obligation. That will help you to plan your cash flow very well. And I refer to the points made by the MD, Dr. Adedoton, for instance, saying that even banks have been renegotiating payment terms with their customers because they all understand the situation. It's a force majeure that is outside the control of everyone. So equally, the tax authority will be open to listen to such conversation from taxpayers. And also, I would say that just as banks are doing this for their customers, taxpayers should also go to their own vendors and ask for the same reprieve as well, because again, this is outside anybody's control. So if banks are doing that to borrowers, also every customer should be able to go back to their vendor and renegotiate the commercial terms by way of discounts or other breather that will enable them to wait through this term. Also, there's a question about the recent announcement by the chairman of the FRS asking taxpayers, including banks and other corporations that are seemingly making money during this crisis, to come and pay their tax upfront. First is, there is no obligation to pay your tax earlier than the time due. However, if you choose to pay your tax upfront, there is 1% discount that you can get on the amount of tax paid. So that's an incentive that anyone who wants to pay their tax upfront can take advantage of. And I must say that everything the chairman has FRS has said, no tax from the FRS. Also, in terms of what business should be doing, because I believe that as a collective, businesses need to come together. Emergency stimulus bill that is before Senate. House of Reps passed that in March. However, there are challenges with that legislation. Incidentally, yesterday, KPMG held a webinar on turning COVID-19 challenges to some of the ideas that we put forward during that webinar, which businesses using their industry situation at this time. So in the stimulus bill, there are provisions for waiver of import duties on medical equipment, medicines, personal protection equipment, and other medical necessities required in the management of the pandemic. And this is great. And perhaps the only positive thing we can say about that bill. There's provision for employment relief of 50% of pay-as-you-earn tax paid or payable as start way for eligible employers. But the question is really, it is wrong to use the basis of pay tax paid by employees as basis for granting tax relief to employers. But I'll talk about what needs to be done to improve on that. Also, oil producing companies are exempted from this relief. And the question is why? They are also not immune to the current situation that we're facing in the country. And so also as they are directly impacted by the slump in crude oil prices. And then restriction of deferral of mortgage obligations for 180 days only to National Housing Fund contributions. There's no reason why this should be. All mortgagors are facing the same situation, and that relief should be extended to all of them. So, having said that, there are ways by which the bill can be improved upon, and I'll be making some suggestions here, which businesses should take on board through the industry associations and advocacy platforms to make a case to the National Assembly. First, the basis of employment relief should be changed from payee tax to payroll cost. The percentage that government is willing to give is then a different question, which they should do. And then the claim should not be by way of tax rebates, whereby people apply for cash refund, because that's going to be an administrative nightmare. Rather, it should be by way of deduction as an expense against the profits of the company. And like I said earlier on, all the point I want to make is concerning employer statutory contributions. 1% of payroll costs to industrial training fund, and also 1% of payroll costs to employee compensation fund. Really, I would say that at a time like this, employers need to be helped to have more cash flow in their hands than for this money to actually obligation to continue to be paid. And my proposal would be that for the next 2 years, ITF contributions and employee compensation fund contributions should be suspended. If you are an employer, for instance, that's paying 1 billion naira in salaries to your employee in a month, that actually means that for those two statutory contributions, you'll be paying 20 million naira to these agents. So in 1 year, that's 240 million. That's a significant amount of money. And I believe that if these contributions are suspended for the next 2 years, these two agencies of government, ITF and also NSITF, collecting this fund, they will not be out of pocket, and they should see and employers in terms of training and all of that, and also workplace compensation insurance over the next 2 years, because they will have built reserves over the past few years. Then also the threshold of 5 employees that then obliges an employer to be contributing to ITF should be removed completely, because a small company that's making 25 million naira in a year is a small company, but then they can employ more than 5 people. Why should we saddle them with the obligation to be making contributions to ITF? And my proposal would be that the government should adopt the threshold of 25 million naira for small company, 100 million naira for medium-sized enterprises in the Finance Act, which is a threshold for their preferential tax treatment, to exempt them from ITF contributions. So in essence, the ITF should be amended under the revamped economic stimulus bill to exempt small and medium enterprises from contributions to ITF. As to COVID and all the contributions they have made to for COVID-19 and other donors, they need to worry about the tax deductibility of these donations. And my proposal is that in the revamped economic stimulus bill, provisions should be made enabling them to take a deduction of the contributions that they have made. We haven't seen any gazette yet issued in that regard. The minimum tax under the Finance Act 2019, this is 0.5% of the turnover of any company that is either loss-making or is taxed based on the promise made in a year will not be up to 0.5% of its turnover. By the time companies are going to be filing their returns next year, you find that a significant number of companies will be either in losses or they have only made marginal profits. And if that is the case, most companies will be obliged to pay minimum tax of 0.5%, and that can be a significant amount of money. So my proposal is that in the revamped economic stimulus bill, let the rate be reduced from 0.5% to 0.25%, again to give some relief to businesses and put some more cash in their hands. So just before I hand my contribution, also the new VAT rate of 7.5%. I think that for the rest of this year, we should revert to the old rate of 5%, because this is going to affect cost of doing business at a time when businesses are struggling with their cash flow challenges. Also, consumers at a time when also their purchasing power has been impaired. And the deferral of mortgage repayments by 180 days, limited to contributors to National Housing Fund, should be extended to all mortgagors, irrespective of whether they are contributed to the NHF. And the minimum wage earners, these are guys who are really low-income earners, and I would say that they should also be exempted from tax at this time, because they are the vulnerable members of the society and need to be supported at this time. So those will be my contributions at this time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Obayomi. So I can actually see that indeed you are an engineer and you are also a tax consultant. You ended bang on time. You didn't go over by 1 minute. So thank you very much. The profession actually speaks through the behavior. I picked up on we need to move on very quickly. MD, I have some news. We've lost Mr. Yusuf. He's had to drop off. He's had to move. Apparently, he's called for something urgent and he couldn't give us the 30 minutes that we required. Apologies, we may need to reschedule for him, but we'll move on very quickly in case he's able to join us later. We'll move on and see what happens there. Ian is the group treasurer for FirstBank, and I will go through his resume, but suffice to say he is very well known in the market, and his track record certainly speaks for him. Ini, I think the question on everybody's mind right now is FX, and I think I should just park it there and let you pick that up. But clearly, we are planning and have received a number of questions. So I think you can make it broader. FX, what you're seeing, the CEO kind of covered some of that ground also. But I think you've spoken to quite a number of corporates, so no surprises here.
Thank you, Tosin. Good morning, everybody. Well, I think the key themes, my CEO touched on a few of them, but I think the key things that are affecting the macro environment and by extension, foreign exchange markets in Nigeria are basically three, right? So first of all, you've got the collapse of oil prices, largely on account of the oil price war started between Russia and Saudis and perhaps even the Americans. You've got the impact of COVID-19 with the unprecedented level of global lockdowns that have got it across board, both on the demand side and as well as with the mechanics of normal flow of international trade. We've seen that have a big impact on aggregate oil demand and output. And then you've got policy responses by various countries or fiscal authorities as they try to combat that. So all of that has led to significant impacts on currency markets. And for a commodity exporter like Nigeria, it's been quite extreme, given where and how oil plays such a big part in foreign exchange earnings. So the impact has been clear, and we've come under immense pressure. Now, for us, domestically, a couple of key themes. Understandably, with the global risk of sentiment, we've seen portfolio investment flows dry up on an inward slant into the country. And as expected at times like this, we've seen a lot of withdrawals and redemption. So this portfolio money has tried to go out. Now, in the course of the last couple of years, portfolio flows have played a very significant part in maintaining FX stability. As this money has come in to purchase government securities and equities, they provided that liquidity which has kept this borrowed money, and now it's time to pay it back. And we've seen demand for dollars heightened. So when you give it that backdrop, it's no surprise that we've seen the pressure that we have thus far. Now, we've had a lot of policy response from, I would say they have learned from the events that happened 4-5 years ago. Well, we saw a quicker policy response this time. We saw an adjustment to the currency, which was made early on in the crisis. We've seen a number of palliative measures that they have announced to support the broader economy. We've seen some reaction on the part of the fiscal authorities with paring down the budget, reassessing or resetting the oil price-based fiscal rule, and so on. And we've also seen the central bank take a number of steps. Now, when you look at the FX market today, arguably we have about 5 windows, right? At the peak of the crisis, at the peak of the lockdown, when the country was actually shut down, there was only one window open, which was a retail auction. Since then, we've seen the central bank reopen 2 others. The Form A, Form Q window, which addresses largely what I would class as household demand for invisibles and soft payments. But more importantly, a couple of days ago, they reopened the wholesale auction window and announcing there was an intervention there. So that leaves two. One is the I&E window, which has become the de facto window for most trade, or the quasi-market determined window. We have seen very little activity there, largely because the direction has been outward, with the portfolio investors looking to buy to exit. What we haven't seen is the central bank coming to intervene in that window. They had done that historically, and we expect them to pick that up again. And then the final window has been the BDC window, which addresses the needs of travelers and the retail end of the market. But what we're hearing from the central bank is that that window will be reopened when they see more normalcy in terms of flows and travel. So one expects, as the lockdown is rolled back and airports are reopened to international travel, then perhaps we see that. So what am I saying? I'm saying that it's not all doom and gloom. It does appear that slowly we're taking some steps towards finding ways to reopen markets such that liquidity can flow back. Now, when we step back and look at what's happening globally, what we're seeing is there seems to be a step back from the extreme volatility that was witnessed about a month to 2 months ago at the start or onset of the crisis. So slowly, global markets appear to be resetting, albeit to new levels. We've seen oil prices come off the lows of around $20 a barrel to the mid-30s. We've seen some degree of stabilization in most of the major global financial markets. So it then suggests that the unprecedented levels of stimulus that we've seen by the global central banks, and if you tot it up, it's looking at about $7 trillion worth of liquidity injections or support across global economies, appear to be taking some hold. So that suggests that some degree of normalization is beginning to occur. Market typically will take the lead from some of these. As oil prices or commodity prices start to stabilize, it then provides a bit more succor. Now, more importantly, we have to look at that in the context of how our global trade partners, correspondent banks react. I think with stabilization occurring more and more in their home markets, there's a bit more willingness to support us in the frontier markets like Nigeria. I mean, at the start or onset of this crisis, our ability to conduct international trade was severely challenged, as understandably, there was a big pullback in terms of trade lines, trade finance, and so on. We're beginning to see a reassessment of that risk, and slowly we are able to do a lot more, which is a positive sign. So I think in a nutshell, what we see, liquidity will come back to the markets. I think we've had a knee-jerk reaction where there's been a stop because there's been a fundamental significant shock that created market dislocation. But we believe that the building blocks towards normalization have been set in motion, right, on the part of the regulators domestically, and given the backdrop of what we're seeing in global financial markets, right? So that seems to be working. So I think the critical thing is, what we're waiting for now is time. There is a timing issue here. We believe that it is imminent, that the measures will be congruent around some of the steps that have been taken. And then we then start to see more liquidity flow through the markets. And so it's just a matter of time. I will end by saying we're certainly in a much better position than we were about 2 months ago. And certainly the outlook doesn't look as bleak as it did. Thanks, Tosin.
Thank you, Ini. Group Treasurer, First Bank of Nigeria. Ini says we just need a bit more time. And my response will be time will tell. But we certainly hope for the best. We have questions for you. We'll come back after the next speaker has taken her slot. I quickly introduce Bumi Bajamo. Bumi Bajamo, my colleague also, Group Head of Manufacturing in the Corporate Bank Group, First Bank of Nigeria. So Bumi, you speak to corporates every single day. So we can compare notes. What are you hearing and what's the impact been on our corporate customers? Bumi, over to you, please.
Good afternoon, my GE. Thank you all. Thank you, fellow panelists, and thank you, clients, for attending. From my perspective, as someone who deals with a lot of corporates on a daily basis, feeling the pulse of corporate, I think the Corona episode is one of the most fundamental things that has happened in recent memory. Besides being an health crisis of immense proportion, it basically represented a reshaping of the global economic order as we knew it. I mean, going forward, in my view, it would seem like our era would be characterized by the schism between the world as we knew it pre-COVID and then the world in the post-COVID era, because everything we sort of held there in terms of the impact of globalization, where the world should be moving with the advent of technology and the positive influences of technology, has been reversed on its head with the event of recent past since about January this year. As we go through the tide and we go through this experience, it seemed like before our very eyes, every socioeconomic norm that we held there and we've accepted as norm would change going forward. Such fundamental change, as we have seen, required significant action, both from the government level, corporate, and us as citizens, and also as employees of various organizations. In dimensioning the impact of COVID on corporate, manufacturing, telecoms, across different sectors, I think it's important to actually state what COVID actually meant. So over a period of 6 to 8 weeks, in some cases, and in some cases about 12 months, we had a complete halt to the world economic activity. It was like the world went on vacation. And we saw about 95% of the global GDP unfortunately, the effect will reverberate for years to come, and in the coming months, we will see the impact. But what are the impacts we've actually seen more profoundly within the immediate period? We've seen significant contraction. So in analyzing this, I'll look at the global level and then narrow it down to our own economy, since we are part of the world. So if you look at the global economy, there have been significant shifts in the level of output as evidenced by contraction in GDP. So if you look at the developed economy, starting with the USA, before COVID, the US economy was on the upward trajectory of about 2.1%. US actually went into lockdown around the mid-month of March. And over a 2-week period, we see a complete reversal. Before the COVID impact on the US economy, the level of unemployment was at its lowest in 50 years, at about 3.5%. Now with COVID, we see a complete reversal of that economic trend. The USA lost well above 4.8% of its GDP in contraction terms. Looking across the Eurozone, based on Q1 numbers recently released, we see Eurozone contracting by about 3.5%. Across all the Nigeria's significant trading partners. And whatever happened, like the MD said, in terms of impact of supply chain affects what happened in our economy. So we look at some of this economy. The UK went into lockdown around the 25th of March. Over a 6-day period, the impact of a lockdown of a 6-day period was about 5.8% contraction in the month of March. Same across France with 5.2 for Q1, Italy 4.7, Germany 2.2, Spain 5.2. All of these major economies recorded contraction. In terms of unemployment, like I've said, in the US, as of April, over 20.3 million have lost their job. And as of today, is well above 36 million. Narrowing that down to Nigerian economy, in response to all of those, like the treasurer said, the impact has also been felt in the commodities market. Oil fell significantly, with West Texas Intermediate actually touching on the negative territory as of 20th of April, meaning that people had to pay to even, people had to be paid to take delivery of oil stock for May delivery. Thankfully, we've seen a reversal of those, and those reversals have come because of the significant effort of major governments across the world. So COVID, as I've said, is a major unplanned event. It's a black swan event, essentially. And that's such unprecedented, extraordinary event has also been met by unprecedented level of stimulus done in a timely fashion, which has effectively mitigated what will have been a catastrophic impact of COVID. So looking at it, the US came out with a stimulus package of about $2.9 trillion, followed by other countries of the world. Nigeria was not left out of it as well. In terms of impact on our economy, it's been significant because outside of the COVID pandemic, Nigeria had its own pre-existing condition, which had also affected the macroeconomic landscape. The impact of it was, as buttressed by the finance minister, will be a likely contraction of about 3.5% in our GDP. So as institutions, as corporate and productive segments of the economy, the impact will be multidimensional. From the perspective of corporate, I will actually dimension the impact in two ways. The lockdown period, because we are still within COVID, the numbers are still rising. So the impact during the lockdown and post-lockdown. What did we see for corporate during lockdown? We see essentially a loss of revenue over a 6-week period, or a total halt in revenue drive for a lot of corporate. This is significant. We also saw that despite the halt in sales and revenue, overhead remains static for corporate, but we see significant uptick in operational expenses because there had to be a rejig of strategy, there had to be a rethink of operational procedure. So we see a lot of spacing out in compliance with the requirement of the lockdown and the subsequent ease in lockdown. We also see a lot of shift from working from office, sleeping in the office, to working from home. Working from home is beneficial because it keeps operations going, but it also has a cost in terms of cost of internet connectivity and support for non-essential services with employees that have to work from home. In terms of the post-lockdown era, it is twofold. First, we see a contraction in demand. Demand contraction because over this period and even in period preceding, there had been an increase in disposable income. Disposable income has decreased because there has been a lot of slowdown in economic activities. Product prices have continued to grow owing to the panic buying that we saw, and also high cost of operation from power and other subsets of it. Outside of that, we also see a contraction in profitability. Profitability of corporates have contracted owing to two main factors. Number one, like the treasurer said, restricted access to foreign exchange, which has sort of increased the cost of international trade, and also the increase in cost of international correspondent banking relationship, which is essential to facilitating trade. What do we see going forward in terms of impact? It seems like ability to manage all of the factors that I've mentioned above, and also to manage operations of the corporate effectively, will determine who survives, who comes out strong, because out at every crisis, in the midst of every crisis, there are always opportunity. Why the near-term survival strategy of most customers is to even stay afloat. There are corporates who are discerning. We've seen clients who have done to leverage opportunities that have been presented by the health crisis. So going forward, we think companies with very strong balance sheet would come out stronger. We think marginal players will struggle because they might not have the war chest in terms of being able to compete on price. And like I said, the falling demand and reduced disposable income means there will be heightened competition for the few people that are able to buy what is available for sale. So corporates will need to be careful and be smarter with their operational expenses. In the final analysis, in my view, what we do now, how we proceed forward, the action that corporate will take will determine where we'll be in the post-COVID era. Whether we survive, survival means number one, with less profitability, or we rebound with a burst of innovation and productivity. If we come out with less prosperity, it means there will be lower growth, there will be wider inequality. Nigeria already suffers from this. The Gini index of Nigeria is way above the 60s. So there's a wide range of income inequality in Nigeria. A continuous government intervention might mean government bureaucracy might increase in terms of engagement with corporate. We might also see the return of rigid borders as nations try to survive. But should we embrace the prosperity option in terms of leveraging automation, digitization, and operational efficiency, then we'll see resilient enterprises emerging. By resilient enterprises, I'm saying companies that are able to navigate the crisis and outperform their peers, given their strategy and healthier government, corporation, as well as corporate institutions. I also see the emergence of a reconnected world. So even though we're saying, okay, company will rethink strategy, as long as there is productivity, there is boom, companies are growing, there is still room for interconnectivity. Neither of these options that I've mentioned is inevitable. We could end up with a mix of both. Where we land is a matter of choice for the government, for corporate, and for everyone as citizen, wherever we might find ourselves to be. Thank you.
Thank you, Onibajamo. That was quite insightful. Low revenues, high cost of operations, that mix is not a fun mix by any means. Stronger players will get stronger, marginal players will struggle, so we would likely see some disruption, potentially maybe some M&A activity. I forgot to mention as we went through, we have received quite a number of questions. Some questions are from anonymous clients who have joined. Some questions are from people who have specified where they're calling from. We wouldn't be able to answer all the questions, but if your name was on the question, be rest assured that if your question is not answered, we will come back to you because we know who you are. And if it was anonymous, we'll see how we go, but we may not be able to come through. We'll see if there's a way we can share answers and we can share responses. I'll just run through, and I was just thinking of an efficient way to do this because we're running out of time. But I'll just run through the questions and the panelists will kindly pick up their questions area of expertise. But we did get quite a number of questions and thank you very much. On the CACOVID initiative, there were a number of questions around how we make sure that the packages, the welfare packages are fairly distributed and equitable. There was a question, at least I think to the CEO, around corporate institutions needing to retrain their employees on the back of right sizing that will happen in the specifically, this will be for INI, around the 3.4 billion loan from the IMF and how that will improve liquidity in the country and what do we expect. A question on lack of enough isolation centers. This is for the MD member of CACOVID and the task force considering the use of properties that the government has taken as part of recovery in the anti-corruption drive. There's a question for Mr. Obayomi on considering the time value of money, is 1% enough incentive to make taxpayers pay their taxes upfront? Question on suspension of overdraft facilities, we will come back to you, that's a specific one. And let me just pick up a few more and then we can dive into it. Forward projection, even though this is for INI, can INI give some advice on the forward projections, no matter how uncertain it might appear? When the bank is giving moratorium to debtors, we will come back to you. That's a specific one. Specific one also on the clothing line. Currently, the NAFEX rate is 386 to 387. Do you think rates going down further, or do you see the Naira appreciate in the coming months? Must be for INI. Another NAFEX question. Mr. Obayomi, some people were asking for your notes from the KPMG webinar. We will pick that up thereafter. Withholding tax is a challenge that needs to be reviewed at this time. A lot of withholding credit notes are way beyond the profit of the companies. Government should work on a modality to make the certificates and instruments that could be used for trading, Mr. Obayomi. So I think I will stop here and we can kind of take responses from the different panelists. I will start with the CEO and we'll go through. I think we would have to end. We will not be able to take all the questions. There are quite a lot of them. But like I said, where we have your name, especially when you've told us where you're calling from, then we will come back to you and engage you on specific responses.
Okay, thank you. I'll try and run through some of those that I believe I'm right. There's a question from Ayosh Juremi, basically suggesting that large business enterprise like FirstBank, rather than just retrench or lay people off, we should get them to retrain with an institution like Faith Foundation. Very happy. That's always been our own business philosophy at FirstBank. We don't want first bankers after retirement or resignation to now become ex-colleagues that we will not be proud of. So retraining and preparing them for life post-retirement or is always something that we always look at. So we will look at that. How does CACOVID intend to distribute the palliatives? Like I mentioned, we are working with the Nigerian Governors Forum. We have a structure that ensures that it's not limited to the state capital. We have a structure that takes it right up to the local government and wards. We believe it will work. We currently distribute loaves of bread in parts of Lagos as part of testing out our infrastructure, and that is going on very well for now. So we believe the structure we put in place will work. What we've also done is that we've basically allocated certain stage to each of the key partners within the CACOVID structure to unhold. So for example, yesterday we commissioned the isolation center in Oshogbo. Osun State is being coordinated by FirstBank, for example. So that structure, working with guys who are on ground, has also helped to ensure that deliverables are delivered within budget, on time, and to the right people. So that is that on that. There was a question around about isolation center. Why are we not using properties that have been forfeited to government? In Lagos, I think sometime last week, the executive chairman of EFCC handed over a property that was being seized by EFCC to the Lagos state government. I'm also aware that in most locations across the country, we are making use of existing infrastructure. It's only in a couple of states that we have provided what I call temporary isolation centers. And the reason for using existing structure is very straightforward. These are significant investments running into billions of naira. We want structures that will be useful post-COVID in terms of enhancing the quality of healthcare across the country. If I also move forward, let me see whether there's any other one that is specific to me. There's a question from Israel Gabriel. What is the bank doing to optimize costs during this unprecedented period of disruption? And also, what are the opportunities presented by this disruption that the bank can leverage? A good example of how we are leveraging this disruption is the session we're having today. This event, ideally, will have taken place in an hotel. We have incurred hotel bills, we have incurred bills on feeding, on speakers, etc., etc. So we are leveraging things. And when I mentioned during my opening remark, I said part of what is required for this season is for us to think without the box. The challenge I've always posed to my colleagues is let's think of a digital form of whatever it is that we used to do. So this is the digital form of this customer event that we used to have. So we are definitely looking at, we are taking advantage of things, moving a number of things onto digital platform. I indeed mentioned during my opening remark that we have successfully migrated up to like 85% of our customers in these transactions are now conducted on channels. We will not relax. Our goal is to get north of 90. Globally, when you have an institution, a financial institution, a bank, with greater than 70% of customer-induced transaction being carried out on channel, that institution is actually regarded as a fully digital bank. But even though we are currently at 85, we are going to continue to push the envelope to ensure that we get to north of 90. Again, the cost to serve is lower in that particular on alternative channels. So we are looking at several opportunities to do things differently. I believe there was a question about from Dr. Taiwo Uju. Please, as a big bank, how do you strategically plan and taking drastic action towards your organizational structure and culture, coupled with your plausible future plans using scenario planning? Has COVID-19 has altered our vocal world for now? Authentic leadership is concerned. I agree with you absolutely. We are doing what is required. I've said it that we are thinking outside of the box. In the first instance, like I said, we've been quite successful moving a significant chunk of our transaction to alternative channels. For most of the initiatives that we're pursuing, we have what we call the level 2 that we're going to, which is taking them to the next level and optimizing and digitizing most of those things as much as possible. Like I also mentioned in my opening remark, COVID-19 is giving business leaders opportunity to rethink established wisdom. even though that was an admonition to business leaders, we've applied and we're applying the same thinking into the way we're looking at our institution.
Thank you, MD.
Thank you.
I would move to Mr. Obayomi, and the questions still continue to come through. Like I said, where we have your name, we will come back to you even when the session is over, where we have specific questions. Mr. Obayomi, please, can we hand over to you to take the...
Thank you very much, Tosin. In response to the question on whether 1% tax rebate for those who pay their taxes in advance to the FRS, corporate income tax now, whether it's enough or not, I think every taxpayer should just do their own value for money analysis. If it's okay for you to pay your tax in advance in return for the 1% discount, please do it. If it's not, you are not under any obligation to take advantage of the incentive. There is also the question, okay, yes, I will make my presentation available, not a problem at all. Also the one we did at KPMG yesterday, and we'll be able to get back to you. There's a question we had, there'll be filing of withholding tax at branch level. Does it mean that FRS is discontinuing the consolidated filing system of monthly VAT? This question is from an anonymous participant. Not exactly so. I think by law, you can file your VAT centrally. You are not obliged to do branch filing if that's not convenient for you. There's a question about rumors arrived that government has given workers a tax holiday from payee tax. Is that correct? What exactly is wrong? The House of Reps in the Economic Stimulus Bill tried to use payee tax as basis for granting employment relief to employers, and that's what's causing confusion in the market. So government has not granted any tax holiday from payee tax to any employee or any other individual liable to income tax. And that's why we are proposing that rather than use payee tax as basis for granting that relief, the basis should be the payroll cost. I mentioned earlier on also that state governments still have to run, so they need the personal income tax that individuals have to pay. And that actually is also going to be at a much reduced level, given the fact that employees are suffering job losses now, and there are also pay cuts as well. So they can't afford to really grant income tax holiday to individuals at this time. There was a question on withholding tax about converting this to tradable instruments, and I quite agree, because withholding tax is really cash, and in a situation where the FRS is not on timely basis granting tax refund to taxpayers, really taxpayers should be able to trade in this instrument, sell it to anyone else who's ready to buy it at a discount. Particularly if the holder of that withholding tax credit does not have any tax to pay now or in the foreseeable future, they should be able to trade in it. And we hope that someday, as part of the reform of tax laws, that the tax authorities will accept that and make it a tradable instrument. An initiative was recently introduced with respect to infrastructure tax credit, for instance, whereby if you have done a public road, a federal road for that matter, and you are entitled to income tax credit over a 10-year period, if you look at your projection, you're not likely to utilize it, tax credit, you can actually trade with it, with the approval of the FRS. So we think that at a time in the future, really to release cash into the hands of those who are holding this withholding tax credits, the same concession should be extended to tradability of withholding tax credit notes. I think that's about all for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Obayomi. Thank you. Thank you for that. I was just looking at the questions and you did a decent job in addressing them. Over to Ini. I'm sure you've seen the questions, a lot on exchange rate direction and rates. I put you on the hot seat, Mr. Ini.
Okay, thank you. There are quite a number of questions, so I'll try and bunch them up and deal with them. adjustments. Clearly, given what we've seen in oil prices fall to the direction of the global macroeconomy and even the Nigerian economy, one would expect some degree of adjustment. And we've already seen that with the central bank moving from, give or take, 360 to about 386. As to whether that is sufficient or not, it is debatable. But I think time will tell, and it will really be a function of when we see markets reopen fully. Because arguably, when you look at the rates being bandied around today, there is a significant amount of speculative activity embedded in those rates. And again, if we all look back to prior events of this nature, as recently as 2016-17, we did see there was a huge overshoot before the CBN reacted when some adjustments. We've already seen some. And I think it's really when markets reopen that we will settle at a really defined level. In terms of we're seeing increasing activity on the part of the regulators, which suggests that they're taking steps to make that happen. And I alluded to it earlier on where I said more and more of the windows are being reopened. So I think it's imminent. It's just a matter of time. I don't think it's a far drawn out situation like we had the last time. There was a comment around fears of obligations not being settled. I think it's important to clarify this. The last time we went through this, something similar in 2016-17, all obligations were met. Yes, there were delays because it took the central bank over a year to create the INE window. But once that was done, every trade obligation that was due was settled. Reason to doubt that that will not be the case at this point in time. There was a question around what we see happening around interest rates or palliatives around interest rates. I think the central bank has already been clear in announcing what it's in granting same around the whole bunch of intervention facilities that it gives. It has announced various cuts in rates, moratoriums, and so on to support there. But more importantly, for the general commercial lending environment, the central bank's current macro or monetary policy stance is such that it has engendered a low interest rate environment domestically. So clearly, those benefits are already being given right now. I think I've addressed the issue on that. Now, in terms of outlook or what we can do, a number of questions around how do you protect yourself at times like this? One of the benefits that have the central bank introduced post the last crisis was the introduction of the non-deliverable forwards or forwards market or NDFs that are available to domestic clients. This still remains the most effective way to hedge around FX price risk in the country. So what, if I were to advise, or what we're doing in terms of advising our clients, is a number of things. First of all, you need to negotiate extended credit terms with your suppliers offshore, and then you should purchase these NDFs because they do provide FX price risk protection at this point in time. And when you look at the NDF pricing, even though they were adjusted recently, they still represent a significant value. Give or take, you're still looking at around an effective interest rate differential of around 8 to 10%, which in real terms is still relatively cheap, because you will remember that the Naira or Nigeria is not a low interest rate environment. So there's still significant value in the NDFs. Important to note that the NDFs do not guarantee availability of FX, but what they do is hedge the FX price risk. And if you agree with me that what we're facing today, or at this point in time, is a timing issue. right? At some point, markets will reset. At some point, markets will reopen. We may have a new pricing point, right? But the markets will reopen. Given the unprecedented levels of global liquidity, if we create the right domestic environment, a lot of this portfolio money looking for yield or investment opportunities will still come back, and this liquidity flows will continue. We've already started seeing the global macro frame improve, so it's reasonable to expect that liquidity levels will improve at some point. So negotiate extended payment terms with your to hedge pricing. And I think that's basically it. Let me just check. Yeah, so I think I've addressed most of them, but we're happy to take any follow-ons if there are.
Thank you. It's also a good opportunity to probably explain that for individual clients who are on the webinar, what we've been doing, and apologies if we haven't actually been able to do it with you, is we get the team together, so Ini, myself, Bumi, or whoever the group head is, and we have a Teams meeting or Zoom meeting with you and the management, and then we can engage and deep dive on issues that are specific to you. So we've been spending quite a lot of our time doing client calls. We can't come to your offices for obvious reasons, but you know we can get through quite a number of sessions sitting in the office or in our homes. So if we haven't, and if you have any specific concerns or questions, please just reach out to your relationship manager, to me, to Bumi, and any of the other group heads, and we will schedule something and have quality time with you. I'll move on now to Bumi Badjamo. Bumi, there are some questions previously on healthcare. We haven't spoken about healthcare on this call, so maybe you can touch on healthcare before we wrap it up. Bumi.
Thank you, moderator. Okay, so I see a lot of questions, like you said, around healthcare and CBN stimulus package in the wave of the COVID pandemic and other reaction. So in terms of healthcare and FirstBank support for the healthcare sector of the economy, even before the pandemic, our attention has been on the healthcare segment to see how we can partner with regulatory authorities in helping to bring the healthcare segment of the market up to desired states. With COVID episode, there have been renewed focus on healthcare. Indeed, as part of the 1.1 trillion stimulus package brought about by CBN, 100 billion of those is devoted to the healthcare sector, covering hospitals, tertiary institutions, healthcare value chain, other operators, diagnostic centers, wellness centers, and equipment suppliers, importers of equipment, manufacturers of equipment. So the CBN is actually focusing on the entire spectrum of healthcare. But in terms of the intervention fund, as we know, CBN will not directly lend to individual. So CBN will come through credible institution. FirstBank, being a top tier institution in Nigeria, stands in that gap prominently. But for the major bane of the healthcare segment and the healthcare financing had been the relatively unstructured nature of healthcare. There is a lot of potential in healthcare. Various studies have put the size of markets at 5 trillion, with projection that it will grow to 7.5 trillion over the course of the next 4 years. Probably that will be accelerated because of renewed focus. But for us to be able to do that, we need to see structure across those organizations. We need to see capacity, we need to see character, we need to see structured financials, or at least partner with the company in bringing them up to bankable levels. If companies are willing and they are able to work with us, we know the industry is relatively unstructured. There are some established players, but there are a lot more yet to be structured company. We're willing to partner with them to bring them on board, and then they can participate and benefit from the CBN stimulus program. That fund is still available, and it's available for everyone who can comply. The bank will need to issue a guarantee on their behalf. The loan is priced competitively. Before now, intervention funds were priced at 9%. Now, in the wake of the COVID pandemic, CBN has reduced that to 5%. In addition to that, there is 1 year extension of moratorium starting from end of February this year, up all through the end of March next year, 2021. In addition, the CBN also had brought up other sub-interventions. So the manufacturing 1 billion is to support manufacturing value chain, the expansion projects, greenfield. So whether as healthcare or as a manufacturing enterprise producing for healthcare or a logistics provider, we will be able to support in that respect. Around healthcare. And then there's another question around, give us the key facts of the economic emergency stimulus. Like I said, there's 1.1 trillion on the table, in addition to existing real sector support by the Central Bank of Nigeria. All of those are available for companies who can meet the requirement, and we will be so happy to support, bearing in mind that only cash flow repays the loan. So as long as businesses are structured in a way that they can repay the loan, we're absolutely ready to support them.
Thank you, Bumi. Clearly, the pandemic has created significant opportunities in the area of healthcare and the entire healthcare value chain. FirstBank and the corporate banking team is set to help you walk through that where it is of interest and there is expertise and investment in that area. I will hand over to Mr. Iniabong, the group treasurer, who on behalf of the MD and the bank will offer what we call the vote of thanks.
Thank you. Well, on behalf of the board and management of FirstBank, I would like to express my sincere appreciation for all of you that have taken out time to attend our corporate client webinar today. You will all agree these are unprecedented era because based on what medical research suggests, we're going to live with this for quite a while. This will certainly be one of the new norms in terms of engaging with clients and with people. We've had almost 300 participants on this call. We're most appreciative for you taking the time to join us in this way. Like I said, this appears to be our new norm of engaging with clients, and we hope to do more of this again to discuss contemporary issues as it affects you. Looking through the questions that we received today, there's certainly topical issues that affect each and every one and impact on your business. I must say that at FirstBank, we remain committed to working with each and every one of you, as well as the numerous and millions of other customers that we have that are not with us today. We are your dependable partner. We have been for over 125 years. We have seen similar in the past. We think of the last time that there was such a global pandemic. That was way back in 1918 with the Spanish flu. Your bank, FirstBank, weathered that. And we know we will weather this one as well and help you come through all of this. So we express our true thanks, and we just would like to end by saying we remain committed to partnering with each and every one of you to see you through these trying times so we emerge stronger post all of this. So thank you very much. Thank you for your time. God bless you and stay safe. Thank you.